First time I didn't completely fuck that up in a couple of weeks. So take that. And as of right now, Rick Thompson and myself from Jazz Cabbage Cafe are live, and we're expecting many other people to join us. And while we're waiting for that, we'll show off who our awesome sponsors are and why we're able to do this.
And for those of us without the benefit of video, that was our sponsors are Real Leaf Solutions, Redemption Cannabis Company, the Detroit Nutrient Company, BOCO, the Botanical Company, and of course Grow Green MI. Thank you to all.
Yeah, so all of our sponsors are really important, but I'm going to give a little extra highlight this week to these fine people, of which I consider myself a part.
Botanical Company.
And the Botanical Company put out a statement in the midst of some of the controversies surrounding stores carrying the MCMA products, particularly since I've been so outspoken against them. And we were kind of called out on it, but we had this in the works since before then, and we were able to make a statement pretty quickly, and I think it was pretty well received. And I'm really happy with this company and the team that I'm a part of, because this is the right thing to do.
I'd like to just read the first line of this statement. This is a statement from the Botanical Company addressing the caregiver controversy here in Michigan, where certain corporate entities are trying to change the laws in order to disadvantage caregivers and patients and their ability to grow their own medicine. This is their statement, Botanical Company. The Botanical Company and its sister companies, Franklin Fields and BioBiz, remain committed to supporting the backbone of our industry, caregivers, and small businesses. We stand with our fellow industry professionals in their efforts to stop the attacks on caregivers. And that's the end of my quote.
Right on. So, and we're joined by some other people. Colin MacDougall.
What's up, everyone?
Jim Salame. And jumping in with us today a little bit, good old friend and staffer of one of our premier guests, Representative Johnson, Mr. Free the Weed himself, Richard.
Yeah.
Free the weed. There you go. We needed that, man. Thank you. So, Richard, hang out for as long as you'd like. Obviously, you're welcome to chime in on some of the stuff that we're going to talk about. I do want to say that last week's show went really well. And we had Senator Irwin on here, and I thought that was really cool.
He was very forthcoming. You know, we attended a couple of events with Senator Irwin over this past weekend. What a solid individual. What a great guy.
And not only is he a champion for cannabis, but there's also a lot of environmental issues. And the Caterpillar on the night of his fundraiser was, I believe, very appreciative and wanted to let him know it.
He's so close to nature that nature gets close to him.
Nice.
So that was pretty cool. And then, of course, that just started the week of other events. And Rick's Rally the Allies event on Sunday was quite awesome. Many of the major advocacy groups came together, representatives of them, and discussed policies and different projects we're working on, and identified common goals, and just had a very productive time at Daryl Stavros' place in Ypsilanti. And it's also where he held the fundraiser for Jeff Irwin, also where he held a graduation party for his son, and had a lot of activity there over the weekend.
Party over there that weekend.
Yeah.
I heard he also saved some people from the rain, too, on Friday.
You know, the rain was pretty bad here in Michigan. For those that aren't in town, some of those events took place, even though the weather conditions were a little inclement. Hello, Shelly Smith.
Joined by Shelly Smith. So I also want to say that next week's show should be pretty cool. We have talks in the works of being on a party bus in Ann Arbor area, and a new company called Mary Jane Tours. Some people we've worked with before are kind of behind it, but it seems like it's kind of a cool idea, and we were invited to see if we can do that. There's some logistics that have to be confirmed before we can really do that, but I thought it sounded like a pretty fun idea.
Oh no, broadcast from a party bus. Oh no.
So if anybody's adverse to being on a bus and partying, especially Jim not having to really go too far,
Yeah.
Sounds easy. You guys could probably swing by and pick me up.
And
I think Shelly might be adverse. I don't know how she feels about party buses.
and later on today, in about 10 minutes, actually, just because of the scheduling, we're going to be joined by Robin Schneider, Executive Director of the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, weigh in on some of the stuff that's going on out there these days, some of the bills that are floating around, what her organization generally does, how they are looking at some of this stuff. And then Representative Cynthia Johnson, who works with our good friend Richard here, co-hosting with us right now. And she started the Michigan Legislative Cannabis Caucus. And they're keeping an eye on a lot of these same bills and are evaluating them and meeting with other advocacy groups and positioning themselves to be a part of those conversations and to be aware of what's going on, which I think is very cool. And then later on in the show, Attorney Paul Tylenda will join us. And there's been a lot of discussion about trying to find some legal perspective, some legal analysis on what's going on and get a little bit more of maybe a credible and credible legal overview by a professional on what's happening, and some of the questions are, and maybe they'll come up in the conversations that are forthcoming, but just changing the definition of concentrate or extract to resin radically change the law? Does changing the MRTMA have anything to do with changing the MMMA and what caregivers can do? Those things are of a concern for a lot of people, and we'll talk about that, but we'll really get into that with the lawyer so we can get right down to some good information, and we can put everybody's concerns about that hopefully to rest, but we'll see what he has to say.
Yeah.
With that, I guess I want to start addressing that economic impact report that the MCMA came up with. Again, we have Robin coming on relatively soon, so I'm not sure how far we'll get into it, but that's something that we could also get back into, maybe even with Paul again too. We talk about this stuff toward the end of the show, but I have not yet gone through the study itself to look at the nuts and bolts. I don't know how much information is available. I saw that Rick posted something that said there is some things available to look at, so I'm definitely interested in doing that. I want to see how some things were determined as much as I can tell by what's given to us. And on the surface, I'm a little dubious by how it's presented, but for sure, I think the motivation is to present something to lawmakers to say, hey, we got to do something about this. We got to do something about the caregivers taking up so much of the illegal market and whatever else this thing represents, and use it as the basis to try to get support to peel back rights and create restrictions and burdens for caregivers and others. And we know that they're doing that because we discussed the actual language that they are circulating. But anyway, Rick, I know you know a little bit more about it. Maybe fill in some gaps and you see what other people think. And again, we'll go to Robin when she shows up, but then we'll resume this conversation later on.
Well, and before I get into the economic impact statement, I just want to make a quick statement too. This weekend, as we talked about, we had a Representative Irwin fundraiser on Thursday. On Friday, we had, what did we do on? Oh, Friday was, of course, the CannaCon down in Detroit. There were 3 different parties, including a Michigan normal party too. Then on Saturday, I attended a 420 golf thing from the unregulated market out here in Michigan, in Flint, at a golf course. And then on Sunday, we had Rally the Allies. When you proclaim yourself as someone who represents all cannabis users, you have to attend events where all different cannabis users are present, those participating in the regulated market and those in the unregulated market. So some people decided to challenge whether or not I have loyalty to the caregivers because I happen to participate in some regulated market activities too. So no, yeah, I'm still me. Doesn't matter where my butt is, it's still the same butt. So fact is, this Anderson Economic Group study was commissioned by the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association. Those are the people trying to cut caregiver cultivation rights by 80% and patient cultivation rights by 75%. Their conclusion was that the market in Michigan is about $3.2 billion big in 2020, and about $1 billion of that was taken up by the regulated marketplace. Their assumptions are wild and are really unsubstantiated, because other than the 2-page summary that they sent out and they gave to the public, they haven't released any additional documents to explain how they arrived at their conclusions. One of the things they concluded, which doesn't make sense, is that the caregiver market is the same size as the regulated market right now. Now, you have to understand that there's 400 licensed medical distribution centers in Michigan and more than 300 licensed adult use centers in Michigan. If you think the caregiver market is pumping out the kind of cannabis that all of those distribution centers are pumping out, that's probably hard to stomach as far as that goes. Second thing is, here in 2021, we're on pace to hit about $1.6 billion. If in fact the market is $3.2 billion, that would assume that the regulated marketplace has captured about 50% of the overall market share. And I don't think there's a single person on this program that believes Michigan's regulated market has half of the business in cannabis that we have here in the state. And the last thing is, there were some assumptions made in regards to dollar amounts and the way in which caregivers interact with their patients. The Anderson Economic Group lumped caregivers and patients and home cultivators all in the same bucket as the illegal market. So what they basically did is say, here's the regulated market, here's everybody else. But you can't really lump us all together like that when you have a legal caregiver market, legal patient market, legal adult use, home cultivation privileges, and then you have other people, a segment of that big group, doing things that perhaps aren't technically legal under the law. So the Anderson Economic Group study was illustrative of the MCMA's purpose, but it really wasn't scientifically backed up, and it creates more questions than it does provide answers. Anyone else here have a chance to take a look at that might be able to add some questions or comments on that?
Go ahead, Vada.
Well, I was going to say, I checked with some of my black market sources, and they totally disagree with the numbers in that statement.
Pretty sure. I think I think everyone that read that, and many people made comments on different formats that they thought 3.2 billion was a low number. I think that the estimate of caregiver consumption is high. I think that they're trying to create that number to be high in order to advance their political purpose, which is to show that there's a lot of people out there selling cannabis that don't get tested or get taxed. Frankly, it's totally fine to sell cannabis that's not tested. We've been doing it for decades. It's totally fine to sell cannabis that's not taxed. We created a system that allows that to take place. People that want to change it are only trying to do so to save their bad business models. Jamie Lowell.
I was going to add real quick that the historical arrest record of the amount of people they've arrested and the amount of weed they've seized and the value that they've given to that weed just in history shows that those numbers and that math doesn't make any sense.
The Anderson Economic Group released in January of 2020 something called a paper called Blue Smoke and Sears, in which case they said predicting the marijuana market is like reading tarot cards. It has no basis in science. It's just a bunch of speculation, but yet here they are a year later engaging in that speculation and that science. They have a methodology by which they compare alcohol sales, what they call the SIN taxable items. They compare alcohol sales state to state, and that's how they determine what their estimate of cannabis sales are. I can tell you that there are a ton of people that use cannabis that don't use alcohol, and that the alcohol sale concept is just a really poor way to meter cannabis usage. In a press conference that the Anderson Economic Group had with the MCMA and a small group of reporters, Gongwer reports that the person that conducted this quote-unquote study admitted that they don't know how many people in Michigan are using cannabis illegally. They don't know how many transactions are taking place in Michigan illegally, but still they were able to come up with a dollar amount for all of that. This seems pretty suspect, you know?
So you said, Rick, there is this commercial market and then there's everything else. That's first step toward there's us and then there's everybody else. these guys are not stopping it if they're successful with this at that. And with that, the representative has joined us. Robin is not here yet, but obviously when she does, we'll get to her and talk about MICIA for a few minutes. But I say while we have this opportunity and not to make her wait, let's welcome Representative Johnson to the show. Hello.
Hello, and thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. How you all doing?
Hello.
We're great.
Good to see everybody.
Hey.
We're all
Very
socially distanced and lit right up. So yeah.
Unfortunately, I would have to go upstairs to get my medicine, but anyway, enjoy all of you. And just
We'll take some
enjoy
for you.
yourselves.
You
Please
can have a hit of
do.
mine.
Please do. Enjoy yourself.
So I say that Representative Johnson has demonstrated a few times over that she is definitely understanding and in support of this issue. So
Representative Johnson, you initiated something called the Legislative Cannabis Caucus. Could you tell us about that? That sounds very exciting.
Rick, I do want to get into that, but we're kind of still talking about this a little bit. And while Robin's not quite here yet, I wanted to maybe keep the conversation about this economic impact study that just came out to see if you have any thoughts on it, Representative Johnson, and what the MCMA might be presenting this for.
I don't even know what you're talking about,
Okay.
Jamie.
That solves that. They the large investor organization, the manufacturing group, Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association, commissioned a study which has determined that only a third of the cannabis activity sales at large take place in the commercial market, and the rest takes place outside of it. And we believe that's important to them because they want to use that as the basis to try to create more restrictions for existing cannabis activity, in an effort to try to, funnel more of the activity into the commercial market. To us, that's a display of ignorance because that's not exactly how this works, but that's what we believe the thought pattern is.
Jamie, I'm so glad that you are explaining this to me. And for all those who may think that I'm an expert, I am not. That's why I leave all that expert stuff up to you all. And Richard is my expert in my office. So I'm here to learn, just like many other people, but I'm open to assist in any way I can, especially for those who have been cut out of this game. And many in Detroit, this Detroit legacy or whatever it's called. Bottom line is that there are many people who live in the city of Detroit, many people who have criminal backgrounds because they knew how to do all the manufacturing and the sales. Those same people have criminal backgrounds now, yet new people have come into our city, into this state, and they are really trying to monopolize the industry. And that's unfortunate, leaving other people out. So I'm here for a couple of reasons. I'm here to support your efforts as long as your efforts are to be inclusionary of all people.
Right on.
And unfortunately, that's not the way it is. There are some big players, and some may be listening to me right now. I really don't care. But, just be fair, play fair. And that's not happening.
Representative Johnson, just want to give you a little bit of just a basic litmus test that a lot of us use when we're looking at, these bills and the potential of things being changed or amended or added. And essentially, we don't believe that there is a need for any further restrictions, peeling back of rights that already exist, creating more burdens on anybody else.
Give us some examples of what you're talking about, Jamie.
The Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association has been circulating language to the lawmakers. You may have seen it. I'm not sure. In part, it talks about reducing the number of plants that patients and caregivers can grow for patients, making the caregivers participate in the metric system without even being a part of the commercial system, making them test and be subject to inspections and all types of things that, of course, are just unacceptable for us. And then they also would like to make it more difficult for smaller businesses to flourish. If you look later down in the language, the amendment suggestions.
There was something else that I was informed that, and I don't know how true this is, and I don't know whether or not Richard or any of you know, that there's some proposal that people can't grow in their backyards. Did you hear anything like that?
Yes. Yeah, that's being tried. There's another way that caregivers are being attacked, and that's through this court decision, People versus DeRuyter, in which it was called into question, what's reasonable. Like the locals can make policy, and they can be restrictive in some cases as long as it is reasonable. And now that's being pushed by Municipal League and Township Association to see how far they can go with that, and how restrictive they can be and still be under what the purpose of this Supreme Court decision ruling means. But it's difficult because they left out what some things mean in that ruling. So there's a chance for challenges everywhere.
Are you saying that this couldn't be a federal ruling? You're talking about in the state of Michigan?
The Michigan State Supreme Court had kind of a questionable ruling. Hey, at this point, I kind of want to introduce everybody to Robin Schneider from the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association. She has limited time, so if that's okay with you, Representative, we'll talk to her just for a minute. And I know that, hi, Robin.
Hi there.
And thanks for coming on and joining us. I know that your schedule's somewhat limited, but I really appreciate you being on here and able to be part of this discussion. I know you have some things that you want to clarify about your organization. And but before you get started, I just want to say very quickly to everybody my own personal view. I really think the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association is an important presence in Lansing and in the industry right now. And to understand what you do and don't do is important, but without that type of presence and awareness, we wouldn't be in the position to take care of a lot of things as advocates and activists, and that is much appreciated. With that, Robin, please introduce yourself any further and let us know what you have on your mind.
Well, hi everybody. Nice to be here. Representative Johnson, always good to see you. And I guess I really just want to start by thanking Rep. Johnson for, launching the Michigan Legislative Cannabis Caucus. That was long overdue. It should have happened years ago. And the representative just stood up and said, "What do you mean there's not a cannabis caucus? Let's do this." And she just did it. And, I love that, for their first, group meeting, they allowed the Cannabis Freedom Coalition, that many of us are a part of, to come in and give a presentation about really what matters the most. And that's freeing the rest of, Michigan's cannabis prisoners. And, yes, I, represent 300 businesses, but, all of them are in agreement that we need to release the rest of the prisoners. And so, I just want to thank Representative Johnson for making that one of your very first priorities. In fact, the caucus sent a letter to Governor Whitmer, advocating for help as far as moving the clemency program along. And, that's what good leadership looks like. And we appreciate you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Robin.
Yes. Yeah. So the other thing I just wanted to touch on, and I appreciate you guys giving me time to do this, because, there's been a lot of miscommunication, straight up fear mongering going on social media. And that's really unfair. It's unfair to the caregivers. It's unfair to the patients. We don't need to, we need to squash that, because I've gotten a lot of phone calls and a lot of messages from patients and, caregivers over the last few days saying, why did they take our rights away? Why can't we grow anymore? And none of that is true. And so, there are, the bill that was cited as being, so dangerous was House Bill 5129. And that was just introduced last Thursday. It did not get signed into law. It was, what the bill does is it makes it illegal to smoke marijuana in a restaurant. And it has a companion bill, and that bill amends MRTMA, the Michigan, legalization law. And then there is a companion bill to it, 5128, that amends the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act to also state that you can't, smoke medical marijuana in a restaurant. And, I don't know about you guys. Again, it was referred to a committee, reg reform. It hasn't had a hearing yet. It hasn't become law. There was a slight tweak in the MRTMA law that talked about, and I think one thing that is important for people to understand when they're reading this legislation, only the bolded sections are new. So the part where it talks about, butane and flash oil, that was already there. That's nothing new. They changed one word, and that was, plant resin to, marijuana extracts or concentrates. And that's a completely unnecessary change. I don't know about you guys, but when I walk into restaurants, I don't see people smoking marijuana. I mean, have any of you walked into a restaurant and went, oh my gosh, everyone's smoking marijuana in the restaurant? It doesn't.
I wish.
It just doesn't happen. And so, what we have here is a situation where some, prohibitionists, legislators got together and said, let's come up with some stupid bill, so that we can show our constituents, that, we're being tough on pot. And this bill doesn't mean anything. It's stupid. And I'm sure, we'll probably oppose it if it ever does get a hearing, because there's no reason to do it. But
not for the same fears and concerns that are being thrown around. It's just a stupid law that should be opposed.
Yeah, but the one thing I do want to say, and then I'll wrap it up and give the floor back over to Rep. Johnson, because she's so much more important than I am. But I'm happy to see, the community getting activated. I mean, that's a good thing. And one of the things, people are, boycotting and, protesting and whatever, all of that, and then sharing it to social media. And I'm thinking, well, none of your legislators are cruising your Facebook page and reading any of this. So if you're going to do it right. Tag your legislators in that stuff. Make sure they see it. Quit wasting your time. Okay? Tag them. Another thing that's really important is, it's summertime. They're going to be having events in their home districts. They're going to be having coffee hours. Show up. Go to your legislators' coffee hours. Go to their events. Walk in their parades. And build the relationship with them and make sure they know what it is that you want. You can email them, send a handwritten letter. That's impactful. Even more impactful would be to drive a patient, put a patient in the car and drive them to the legislator. Nothing changes a legislator's heart and mind on our issue more than a medical marijuana patient with a serious medical condition. Let them go tell their story. And I bring this up because, every few years we get a whole new group of legislators and they have to all be retaught everything. And it's a continuous thing. And so, I've had a lot of people say like, what are you going to do? And, why didn't you protect us? Even though nothing bad happened. And, my answer back to that is, I don't know why anyone's counting on me to do this for them. You better get up off of the couch and go do it yourself. That's not my job. But I'm happy to coordinate with you, with anybody to protect our laws and good policy. And I think it's really, important. And then the final thing is show up to the hearings. Show up to the hearings. Every citizen has a right to show up to a legislative hearing and give their opinion on legislation that impacts them. So, or whatever opinion they have, show up and participate. And so, other than that, I appreciate you guys for letting me come on here.
You're the best, Robin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robin. Really appreciate it.
And the clarification is needed right now. There is a lot of dialogue coming in from a lot of different angles, and that's what happens when you have new things that pop up and you have a lot of people that are concerned and interested. But more important is that we trust the voices that give us clarity going forward. Later on in this program, we'll have attorney Paul Tylenda coming on. He'll also give an opinion about some of the proposed legislation out there, so people can really get it from the horse's mouth, get it from an attorney about what they think the potential changes would be and what they might mean. So thanks for sharing your insight.
Let me speak about House Bills 5128 and 5129. I too agree that they are dumb pieces of legislation, something that is totally unneeded. I'm a smoker. I've never seen anyone. And let me just back up and say this. As a smoker, even as a cigarette smoker and a cannabis smoker, I don't want anyone smoking in my presence while I'm eating, period. Let me just say that for the record. Yet the bills are totally unnecessary. I have not seen anyone in a restaurant smoking a joint.
Now, the existing laws of not being able to smoke in such places already exist. So is the ulterior motive here? Does either one of you, Robin or Representative Johnson, think this is to possibly put lounges in a predicament at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other concern that I have with it is that we have, on the horizon, social consumption lounges. And, the local health departments have not cooperated with allowing us to have, commercial kitchens and food served there, which is ridiculous. They should be forced to do so. But, one day we are going to, have that. One day we'll get there where we'll have full, restaurants and, instead of drinking wine, we'll be smoking cannabis. And, I think that needs to be taken into consideration that, this is likely it would, stop us from being able to, use cannabis, should we get the right to have fresh prepared food in a social consumption lounge. So that's bad. That's peeling away, preemptively peeling away our ability to have a thriving industry. And it's not necessary. But, the great news is this. Both bills take a super majority to pass. So if enough people get on the phone and contact their lawmakers, and let them know that this is, a bad bill and they don't agree with it and it's unnecessary. And one day we're going to have social consumption lounges with food. And yes, we will be smoking cannabis there, just like, other people do with their alcohol, and educate them. We have a really good chance a very good chance of keeping that supermajority, but everybody has to participate.
Robin, would you say that because of the time you spent and relationship you've made in the industry association that you have built and your presence on this issue in in Lansing is respected and is important for what your organization, what your perspective, what your support or lack thereof on these issues means? In other words, if you're not in full support of it, it's somewhat difficult for that bill to make it on this issue. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Robin, while we've got you here, I did talk to someone this weekend who mentioned that he worked at a licensed regulated dispensary, an adult use retailer, and he had heard about the boycott, and he'd heard it because people coming into his store were telling him, hey, how come you have that still on the shelf? You have 300 companies under your belt with the MICIA. Are you hearing any ripples about the boycott and its effects?
Yeah, so I mean, I've tried to stay out of it as much as possible. I mean, we're busy helping our members grow their businesses right now. So what I will say is this. Our growers and our processors can barely keep up with the new orders they're getting. So, I know that there's been a very positive financial impact in this situation to our members because, I mean, our retail members, are being more thoughtful about the brands that they're carrying. I've gotten a lot of calls over the last couple of weeks of, where can I get some, new vegan water soluble gummies and but here's what I want to say about that. Keep in mind that the retailers there's only so much product in the state to go around, and because of the licenses that were issued first, those were the guys that got the most product going first, right? So we have a bunch of small mom and pop retailers across the state that heavily relied on those products. So to demand, an overnight transition is not feasible or practical or going to happen. And so I understand the sentiment, but I also know that you can't just overnight wipe, products off of your shelves and then tell your patients, sorry, we've interrupted your medicine. That becomes a patient access issue. And so, I understand the spirit of the boycotts. I really do. Our grower and processor members are greatly benefiting from, the, education campaign that just went down. But, it's not something that we can just say throw, their product in the trash overnight. It doesn't work that way either.
Yeah, that's a wonderful statement. Thank you for saying so. I know the No Changes petition has gotten quite a few signatories from MICIA members. It's important to understand that the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association is different from the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association. And didn't you get some calls originally when the boycott began where people were getting the two organizations confused?
I did. I got threats. I got, people trying to sue us. Our phone rang off the hook. And we took the time to explain to every single person that, there are two drastically different, organizations, and that the majority of our members were caregivers who transitioned into the regulated market, and that they're too busy, growing their own businesses to even be worried about, what the caregivers are doing. That's not a priority for us. That is not on our agenda. We would never do something like that. In fact, we don't believe in reigniting the war on drugs in order to shore up profit margins. So, there's a balance here of, business and moral responsibility that every business owner should be practicing and taking into account if they care about their brands.
And the MICIA did issue a statement essentially basically saying what you just said. Did that statement include anything else you'd like to add at this point?
No, just that I was clearly instructed, that we won't support anything that is harmful to patients or caregivers.
So, and you have over 300 members, but the MCMA has what, 13? Is that about right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So, Robin, before we focus back on Representative Johnson here for a minute,
yeah,
what are your thoughts on the economic impact study that came out that was driven by and the MCMA, and what their motivations may be and that type of stuff?
So here's what I see in the study. First of all, we weren't provided all the data. So I'm not sure how accurate I believe that it is.
And why they want somebody to rely on it without providing everything.
I mean, we're given 2 pages of minimal information. But what it did prove is that in just a short year and a half of adult use recreational sales, the regulated market has taken 30% of the, Michigan's entire cannabis market. And I say, well done, everybody in the industry.
Right.
I mean, and I was actually thrilled. I was like, woohoo, we did great. I mean, that is incredible progress. And so when you look at the fact that the war on drugs did not reduce or diminish the illicit market for 40 years, we finally figured out.
You guys are killing it.
We finally figured out how to do it, and it's through legalization. And so, we're certainly not complaining that we're not at 100%. and our members are very grateful to get their 30%. And I know over time that as we get more grows up and running and the price per pound of that product comes down at a retail level where it can compete with the market that already existed before anybody came here and got a license, at one point that'll go over 50%. It'll keep growing, but we have to compete. You don't force consumers into a regulated market overnight. It doesn't happen that way. But I think it demonstrates that we made fantastic progress in a very short period of time.
The Anderson Economic Group study theorized that the adult use market was about 16% of the overall. The medical use market was about 15%, and the caregiver market is 30%. Does that jibe with what you know about the industry itself?
No, I believe the caregiver market is more like 2 to 5%.
Yeah,
that's my belief. Yes.
Yeah. When they put the 30% out there, it was pretty clear that seemed more like
for them to track whether those purchases came from caregivers or if it was imported cannabis. There's no way to track those two.
Are you concerned at all, as we expressed earlier on this show, that they've lumped into one big pile all the illicit transactions, plus all the personal cultivation growth, plus all of the caregiver growth, plus all of the patient growth, and they seem to be lumping everything that's not them into one big pile? Does that concern you from a legislative perspective?
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't,
Yes, it concerns me. It absolutely does. And it should concern all of us. And for the expert, Richard, you can take on any more questions. I'm just going to sit back in the cut and listen and learn.
Yeah,
well, we were concerned too. That's why we expressed that, because often right now the MCMA has expressed a desire to slash the caregiver program and the patients and their plant allocations. And if they're lumping caregivers in with the unregulated market, the illicit market, that means they might try to sweep us all under the carpet together. And that's what our concern is.
Well, and the illicit market is made up of the grassroots people that Robin talked about, who brought this to you in the first place. And if you don't think that this protest and boycott and all this early rabble-rousing was anything more than waking up the cicada-style activist in Michigan, there are people now who are really ready for what's coming. And when we go back into legislative session, the things that Robin talked about are going to be more important than anything. One of the things I've started to ask politicians, and I would throw this out to the representative, is if an individual, and I hate to say this because Robin's a lobbyist, but my question is, if an individual was going to be contacted about a subject, would you rather get a visit from Robin Schneider, who represents over 300 companies, or would you rather have my thousands of people writing you and calling you and showing their individualness but group at the same time? Mind you, these are grassroots people with no money behind them who are taking it upon themselves. So that's what I ask the elected official is, what's more impressive to you? Because I believe we're all bringing you the same information. Now, lobbyists have their place. I'm not putting that to the side. My point is that what you see in Michigan was brought to you by the grassroots, and those people can take it away or change it. So my question is that realized by elected officials when it comes to marijuana? Because no other subject in Michigan was brought to you by the grassroots, except the Headley Amendment, I might add. We don't need to get into that.
Well, there's only a couple of legislators who really are dealing with the issue of marijuana. And I should say that the Michigan Legislative Cannabis Caucus, the last meeting that we had was so few of us that I wondered what was going on. But to answer your question, best way for the citizens who are interested in making sure that we are not thrown out of this game is to absolutely email your legislators, and not just yours, but all of them. Just be nice.
Yes.
During the summer months, calls to offices, do they matter, or should we wait until September to really start I hate to use the word pestering, but to start making those contacts? Because it seems with a 2-month layover that anything we do now might be forgotten by the time action's required.
Keep pestering us.
And would you also suggest, Representative and Robin, that when the message is delivered, to be concise, right to the point? Here's what the deal is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I would even go as far as to say the two companies that are often mistaken for one or the other, Robin, your company, and the other. We need to really be clear about these two companies, because a lot of people are confused. I even have been confused. There is the medical marijuana, then there is the consumption of, what do you guys call it? Recreational.
Adult use or
adult use or recreational. All of it's exactly the same unless it's CBD. Unfortunately, on the other side of the aisle, what I'm seeing is that they're quietly trying to close out the medical part of it and just make it one. And that will hurt a lot of individuals. It will hurt a lot of our caregivers. And we have to stop it. And so, as much as I hate my staff being bombarded with email and phone calls, I would suggest you keep doing it. And as a matter of fact, just make a reminder, do it every week up until we get what we need, or up until you guys get what you need.
Rep Johnson, you just said something that's caused some concern. You mentioned that the guys on the other side of the aisle, the Republicans, are perhaps plotting to eliminate the medical program. Now, we've seen efforts to combine the business licensing program on the medical and the adult use programs, but are there actual rumors of trying to eliminate the patient caregiver program as well?
I'm hearing little bits of rumor. I don't know anything that's factual, but I'll say this, that I introduced 2 bills, the use and the sales tax, to eliminate both the use and sales tax off of medical marijuana. And the chairperson who is over the committee where it is, and I don't remember the name of the committee, Richard, maybe you know it, but Representative Hall straight up told me that will never be seen. Not during this session. But I'm still trying to work on them. So that just tells me if they don't even want to address eliminated taxes off of medical marijuana, which of course, why wouldn't you do that? It's medicine. We don't tax prescription drugs. So then why the hell would you tax this? But they don't want to deal with it. And I see, and I believe that in part you're seeing some of the legislation that they're trying to get passed. Much of the legislation, I do not believe that most of this legislation will even pass, because secretly there are many who smoke and many whose families smoke. And so maybe the legislators are working hand step with I don't know. I don't know. But I do know that even some of the legislators who are on our caucus, so far they're on the caucus name only. In other words, people are not fighting as much as they ought to.
So, Representative Johnson, do you think that the possible change in composition of lawmakers in 2022, after some of the gerrymandering issues they're taking care of, might allow for some more functionality in the legislature?
Absolutely. As soon as we do our jobs as residents and as voters to vote to get into the majority, I'm talking about Democrats right now, because unfortunately, and I'm sure that maybe one or two of you may be Republican, but I'm telling you, my friends on the other side, they are too mean-spirited, and I'm being real nice, mean-spirited with issues such as this. So we can bitch all day long, but until we get out there and really get in the majority, the things that need to happen just won't.
You know, Representative and Robin both, I'm curious, we know that it takes a supermajority to amend a voter-directed initiative like the MMMA of 2008 or the MRTMA of 2018. What is the likelihood of us being able to stop that other side you keep mentioning from achieving a supermajority? That's a 3/4 vote in the House and the Senate. Representative, what do you think about the House? And I'll ask Robin about the Senate.
As I'm really thinking about, you're talking about for 22, or are you talking about, is that what you're talking about?
Well, they have a 3/4 supermajority vote, whether they vote on it in 2021 or in 2022. If they vote on any cannabis related issues that would amend the legalization or the medical laws.
I already told you, Rick, what to do. Mm-hmm. Keep bugging the legislators. You have to.
So just in your opinion, though, Representative, when we have something that we really disagree with and we want to shoot for peeling back at least enough lawmakers to not allow for that supermajority, I guess between either Robin or Senator, I'm sorry, or Representative Johnson, does that seem likely?
I think so. I do think so. I think that the supermajority can happen in the positive, because like we all agree, all of us have family members who smoke, and it is my view, and I've never known, and this is another thing that's really which is really effed up. And that is to say that marijuana can make you drunk, or I don't know of anybody like that. I don't. Are we talking about cannabis? Let's talk about cannabis versus alcohol. Cannabis, alcohol. Listen, alcohol.
It's a poison.
It is a poison, and it can't. And I have a son right now who was born fetal alcohol syndrome.
No comparison at all. They work differently in the system and all that kind of stuff. And that reminds me of another thing, real quick, Representative. Cannabis, even though we've approved it for medical use, even though we have legalized it to the extent that we have, it still remains on our state's controlled substances list, and on the same list with many things that it is also nothing like. And hopefully, I mean, the word is that Representative Robbie will introduce a descheduled bill in the fall, and we're hoping that we'll have your support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is, I mean, that's like a crazy question. That's a done deal.
All right.
Period. And are you guys done with me? Because my experts are all right here.
Never. We're never done with you.
Oh.
You're a pleasure to talk to.
I have to address something that Adam said, and I know people have been like, Robin's a lobbyist, right? I've got to address that right now. So, lobbyists get a really bad rap. I understand why. And, I definitely did not plan on becoming a lobbyist at all. I started out as an activist. My father had been incarcerated for a cannabis related crime. And, I worked on all of these laws and, the ballot initiative, for those reasons, to stop the mass incarceration of our parents. Once we launched the association, the first thing we had to do was lobby for the removal of that licensing board. And, I didn't realize this at the time, but my attorneys told me we have to register you as a lobbyist. Even though we pay a lobbyist, Kevin McKinney is our lobbyist, and he's the most honest person I've ever met in my life. He's a saint. I couldn't have gotten a better lobbyist. Thank you, MACC, who originally hired him. But legally, for me to be able to go and say, we need to get rid of this board, or, we need to change this or that, legally, I had to be registered as a lobbyist. So that is how that came to be. That was not my idea. And you can use that for good too. But if I were to go advocate for those things, technically I would have been breaking the law because I was being paid to do that. So if that puts things in perspective.
Robin, your organization represents industry participants, licensed industry participants, and protects against forces that would make things unreasonable, similar to the discussion that we're having about the MCMA. I mean, you are not that organization. They want to do things that make things unreasonable. They take approaches that don't really seem to fit the vision of those who understand a little bit better about what's going on here like this. But while you and your group are a lot more in tune and aware of what's going on, you don't directly represent caregivers.
No.
So that's an important distinction when people believe that you should be doing that.
No, that's not my job.
Yeah, and but indirectly, as I pointed out earlier, when it comes to like what's reasonable policy and that type of thing, our groups, our advocacy groups, caregivers, political organizations, whoever, we're kind of on the same side. We've been able to kind of work together because there's similar interests in a lot of the ultimate outcomes of these policies. And in some cases, when we're all working against the MCMA, it's to preserve, a reasonable commercial system, not one that just benefits a small group.
So two things here. The bulk of my time is spent making sure that my members have banks and discounts on insurance policies and packaging that they need, and introducing them to each other, as well as lobbying against billboard bans and industry related things. But we also fully understand the importance of coalition building, which is why the MICIA is a part of the Freedom Coalition. Just like other big, entities out there lobby for, good social justice reform all the time, we do the same thing. And so, I think that it's important to us to maintain those relationships with our coalition members. So, we're always very thoughtful about what our coalition partners think about everything. And the other thing is when this, anti-caregiver stuff comes up in our board meetings, our board members, they're like, why is anybody spending any time focused on this? It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't, they laugh, like, what idiots, right? Like, go worry about growing your own plants. And maybe if you knew how to grow good weed, you wouldn't, be spending a bunch of money trying to ruin other people's lives. and your brand simultaneously. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that.
Reach it, Robin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Robin, this is kind of rhetorical, but
I can't see you guys anymore, and it's really bothering me.
There we go. This is kind of rhetorical, but just to like set the record straight. Do I or anybody else on this panel with you right now have any input into your organization's decisions, or any of us on the board, or any of us on it, or any legislative committees, or anything that would have any input in your organization? The company I work for is a member of your organization, and that's about the extent of it. And other than that, when we politically work together, it's based on coming together on a particular issue and deciding how we're approaching it, if it's in our mutual best interest. And like you said, we kind of intersect at that Freedom Coalition quite often, and do it there. So
hold on, come say bye to everybody. Come on, guys. The whole team's here. Hold on. Come on, guys. You're welcome to Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Get in on this.
that's a nice view, by the way.
I know.
You know where your
Can we
building is?
Say hi.
Hey, now.
Hello.
It's, come on.
Hey.
This is who they're really looking for. Isaiah.
Is that Isaiah? There you go.
All
you
right,
doing,
bye,
man?
guys. Okay, so.
Anyway, point being, just wanted to clarify that for those who are
those your babies?
continuing to spread.
That's our staff.
Okay.
Yeah, that's our development director and our marketing director.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point was just to clarify for those who misunderstand, what a lot of us do and how these organizations work and what you actually represent, what you don't. And I was hoping to kind of also reflect a little bit today on why the organization is so important for advocates and activists.
Cool.
Yeah,
Robin,
yeah, no, I mean, we have.
I just wanted to interrupt real.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to interrupt real quick and make sure everybody understands what a superstar or rock star Robin is in the marijuana cannabis space, because there is no other group that has 300 members. There is no other group that has done what Robin has done. And the funny thing is, yeah, I pick on her because she's a registered lobbyist. I kid you not, you can do a Google search of my phone. I looked it up last night, what it takes to become a registered lobbyist in Michigan. I keep hearing all these caregivers say, who's our lobbyist? Who's our lobbyist? And I thought, why don't we have somebody registered as a lobbyist? And I literally looked at it, and I understand it, and I get it, and it's important. And, we all play the same sport. We may not be on the same team, but we can certainly come together for a competition or a friendly event and get some things done. And that's the best part about hearing from Robin, because Robin will stand up and speak for her organization and the people she represents. And better yet, she also speaks for herself and tells you where and who she is. And once you realize who she is, you realize that nobody who came from where she came from and went through what she went through is going to be anything other than on our side.
Right.
Now, she may represent a bunch of other people who may not agree with us, but
but they generally do, though. Is also
right.
Yeah.
But they're generally all, again, everyone has the same opinion. So I think that's important to note, because, we don't see these other organizations, no matter who they are, coming out and telling us and who they are and introducing us to them and trying to explain maybe we got it wrong. I mean, maybe we don't see something that they see in this legislation. I don't know. Come and explain it to me. I mean, I'll be honest. I have a workaround for the you can't smoke in a restaurant thing. It's a working model. I've seen it happen. But that's a ridiculous piece of legislation that doesn't matter and shouldn't happen in the first place. Right. And the fact that we can go to a half a dozen restaurants in Detroit and smoke them out, that doesn't mean that there should be a law against it. But that's where I come from.
So I love that you just, some of what you just said. And in fact, it kind of reminded me of something when I first started working, for this association, and, some members of another group, basically, labeled me as a liberal hippie and she's just an activist. And then, some people in government kind of said like, well, are you really a business association or are you an activist? Pick your lane kind of thing, right? As if being an activist was a bad thing. And I really had this, moment with my board where I said like, is it bad, that I'm truly an activist? Can I still be representing businesses at the same time? And they said, what are you talking about? We're all activists. Right. We just happen to get licenses. We picked you because you're an activist, right? And so that was something that was like, oh, I don't have to turn into like some corporate jerk just because we're in business now.
I want to now use
still be activists. And so that was something that was really helpful to me as I was getting my footing, in this new career, because the term activist, men, bullies were trying to use that, to put me down, to make me less than them. And you know what? Look at me now. I'm not going anywhere.
Look at you now, girl.
Yeah.
And you know what? I cannot say, Robin, you are so right. But as a woman, I shouldn't say but. I'll say as women, people like us, especially if you're strong, if you're advocating, take me for an example. I'm a politician and an activist. The two really don't. It's always fighting against, but I can't help it. I have to live with myself. I can't see things going wrong, being wrong in our government. I see it and I don't say anything. That's like seeing somebody walking into a brick wall and you don't try to stop them. So good for you. Keep doing you. Be the businesswoman and the activist that you are.
And you can do both.
And you can do both.
In fact, I think it's better this way, to be honest. I mean,
you keep everybody honest.
Mm-hmm.
And you remind me of an example of how you have helped out also directly. There could be an issue that comes up and it doesn't directly pertain to the representation of the business industry organization that you have. And I know that you have told those trying to push it or those trying to make decisions on it, you have to go consult the activists and the advocates on that, because that's more of the stake that they have is in that issue.
I've absolutely insisted on that. And
give us a voice at the table. And
what I tell them is consider them a giant sleeper cell just waiting to be provoked. And then they're coming. So you better make sure they're okay with it, because don't look at me and ask me to hold them back, because they're coming no matter what. So yes, I always try to say, like, what other stakeholders have you talked to? Because there's a lot more stakeholders than two groups over here. And, this ballot initiative got passed, like our whole industry was built on the backs of caregivers and patients and activists and prisoners and veterans and, all of that. And so every single one of those people has a voice, whether you want them to or not. So you better get some, everybody on board, at least make sure. I mean, even, I constantly am reaching out, working with hemp groups and clemency groups and, everybody. I mean, we have to do that.
I'm looking forward to your upcoming competition. Whatever group comes up that one day can claim, well, we have 300 members, and Robin Schneider can sit back and say, well, yeah, but my 1,500 members. But the point is, it's coming. We're becoming an industry where there will be many groups, and it's who they represent and what they represent, and a little bit of how they represent them. I mean, we've all admitted that if the MCMA vomited differently than they did, we might have been a little more, unaware. But when they came out the way they came out with their proposal, nobody was going to stand for that. So, the future's what's real interesting, because we're in its infancy, and to be as successful as Robin is just shows that it's possible.
We have been joined by attorney Paul Tylenda.
And joint roller.
Yeah, finishing up a joint there, but there are some people that have a lot of concern and questions about what the potential of some of what the bills could do if they were to get traction. And we mentioned, Representative Johnson mentioned it, I think Robin mentioned it, and Paul mentioned it when I talked to him earlier. There's a lot of bills out, there's 50 some. Very few of them are ever going to get a committee hearing. Even some of those that do aren't going to really get that much traction. And it's when these things actually get traction and start getting support is when our support or our opposition, is going to get ramped up. And until they get to that position, they're done for many different political reasons. So Robin brought up 5129 earlier. Has some screwy things in it. It has to do with not smoking cannabis in restaurants and some other stuff. There's concerns about some of the arbitrary language changes in it, and what its effect could be potentially on continuing to get patients the medicine they need, the RSO and other extractions that they need. And while I guess I don't read that into that, I was on a Medical Mondays last night saying that's not the case. From my layman's view of it, we're interested in having a little bit more credible of a legal analysis from someone such as yourself on some of these questions. So I know you were able to take a look at it. Just wondering what your thoughts are.
I read through, and one of the first things I did in terms of going through the bills and how they're clustered together is take a look at the bill analysis through what's reported through the committees, and it gives you the breakdown, and it'll give you the content. And this is sort of like the cheat sheet, right? Give me the Reader's Digest version, as they used to say. Give me the quick version of what these bills mean and what the real material issues of these proposals are, right? What the changes are. And I even read through the change in the language through the proposed language of what the House bills were, and even the Senate bills, where they make it nice and easy to either cross out words and add words in bold so that it's clear to understand what's being added and what's being taken away. The practical reality of this goes back to something that Jamie and I had talked about earlier. Has to do with the way that I view Lansing politics when it comes to the MMA and when it comes to marijuana in a larger sense is, do you have enough steam to get accomplished? Do you have enough steam to get the train over the hill from the legislative level, right? And if so, is the content of these bills, is it more form over substance? Is it more semantics over change? Or is it something that actually would create a material change in any of the laws, right? And with voter initiatives, the first question I have is, do you have that 3/4 majority to get the vote? Or, absent some lame duck issues, absent some what I call horse trading or some political back scratching where it's, we're going to vote on this and you're going to vote on this and we're going to exchange and we'll make everything happen and we'll keep, we'll play politics and we'll play nice in the backyard. Some of that stuff I'm always curious is there enough, and is there something there that would, again, cause that change or give us something to be tangibly afraid of? And then the second question is, well, are we just changing words, right? So looking through the bill analysis, when it comes to 4517, we're talking about, definitions of THC, right? Does that get offensive? Modify the definition.
You're freezing up, Paul, if you can hear us. The connection isn't the best.
Just getting to the good part, too.
Yeah.
Paul, you're frozen.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say something really quick while we're waiting for Paul to come back on. Are we planning on, Rick, especially you could do this, a rebuttal of some kind to just the bullshit it's been reported about that, 30% being the market share? Yeah.
Oh, the Anderson Economic Group, and I think what we will do is probably circulate a paper and get some expert opinions to maybe contribute a couple of comments on that, and then possibly publish it or create a press release with it, whether it's a product of Michigan Normal or just something that we do as a community. I'm uncertain about that, but I feel like we do have to raise some issues with that. And one of the basic things is the methodology is being kept secret from us. The sourcing is not available, and therefore it's not as scientific as the Anderson Economic Group's other papers in the past. So it's notorious by its absences. Let's just say that.
Excellent.
So
While we're waiting.
the ones that we were just talking about the restaurants, is there one coming down the pipeline about lowering caregiver counts and all that? Like, is that just barely percolating, or is that sitting on somebody's desk?
That's a proposal that has not yet been created as a bill to date. We did see several lawmakers have talked about having MCMA people in their offices, proposing to slash those. But until they get the supermajority and they feel they're confident with it, I probably won't introduce an actual bill itself. That's my thought.
You keep saying supermajority. All we need is a simple majority.
Well, to amend the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, or to amend.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Robin, are you trying to say something?
I wish Paul was still here. Where'd he go? No. Okay, because the one thing that really freaked everybody out was, in this bill, there he is, where it says, I'm talking, Paul, about House Bill 5129, where it says, page 2, line 8, separation of plant resin. Now, there's already a prohibition, right? And so the way it originally reads is, you can't separate plant resin by butane extraction or another method that utilizes the substance with a flash point below 100 degrees Fahrenheit, right?
What's the House bill number?
That's the one for the no smoking in restaurants, right?
5129.
Yep. So then Paul, they cross out separation of plant resin and they change it to separating marijuana concentrate. What does that even mean, right? I mean, and I think that some legislative drafter was like, let's call it this instead, not even knowing, I mean, because it doesn't stop us from making Rick Simpson oil. It doesn't stop that. And why would you separate a marijuana concentrate? For what purpose?
You separate it from its container when you use it.
What page are you talking?
Page 2, line 8.
This is what the
dumb, but Paul, I want your opinion on what that does legally.
It creates legally, all it does is it creates the need for either you go back to the definition section or you have to add the definition section, because just like what they crossed out, now the first thing I look at is what the hell is plant resin? How is that defined? Now I go back and to say what the hell is marijuana concentrate and how is that defined? Because I believe that there are other definitions that have to do with the separating the marijuana product or the marijuana what's the word, a THC solution or something along those lines, something a little more general. Whereas I think the funny part is we're getting caught up into the cultural semantics of what marijuana concentrate means. The person who wrote this isn't thinking in terms of dabs and little things in jars and waxes and butters like the rest of our people are. They're thinking of it in terms of just like, it's not marijuana flower, it's just a marijuana thing. Let's just call it marijuana concentrate. So I think that we're getting lost in the semantics, and if they clarify that definition in another bill or within this bill to adjust the definition sections that precede, which is usually
okay. So what do you need me to do? What do you need me to do?
Clarify that language.
Here's what I think it really does. Here's what I think it actually does. Okay, nobody separates marijuana concentrates by butane. they separate plant resin by butane, okay? So by crossing out plant resin, now they're saying we can separate plant resin by butane. They actually gave us permission to do it, is what they did. So I bring that up because it was clearly a drafting error, okay? But what they really did was actually let us use butane. It allows us to do it now, okay? So anybody who got on social media and told anybody that this takes away Rick Simpson oil lied to you.
Right.
And I say that because I hate seeing patients scared. That is really unfair. That is a horrible thing to do to people, and that's why I came on to set the record straight.
You created
Especially when someone doesn't
hysteria.
glorify themselves.
You're right. And Robin, you addressed something very, very important here too, is that in substance, right, in true change of landscape for patients and caregivers, the only, and even for MMFLA or MRTMA licensees, is I think the only substantive change within this bill is the inclusion of the food service establishment. All of these other changes are streamline changes, they're semantic changes, they're verbiage, the language changes.
Stylistic. The LSP does that all the time.
They don't affect the material content of the law. It affects the way that the law is readable, if you will, right? The way that the language is flowing within itself. And then we're addressing the issue here with this, what's this plant resin versus marijuana concentrate, is that as the words flow together and as you're going to apply legislative intent once you litigate these later on, it's a flow issue, right? It's a continuity issue in terms of, right, under 21 years of age, you're just cleaning up some of the junky and clunky language to make it a little more modern. So, yeah, the question of, what is this, crossing out plant resin, like you said, does that mean that now I can separate plant resin because I'm not separating marijuana concentrate? Is the lay person going to understand the difference? And more importantly, is the legislature going to understand the difference? So is there a better way to get the intent of what that language tries to accomplish? Is there a better way to clarify that, right? And that is to say, is there a definition that we can all agree upon that is clear to the consumer, clear to the public, and clear to the legislature, which in turn hopefully makes it clear to lawyers and to judges and to anybody else that would have to fight a problem later on?
Because ultimately what we want to do is create a situation where judges and consumers have the same mental attitude about what's going on. And you only do that when the language is so clear and unambiguous. And I think this has added ambiguity, not removed it. And I agree with in the comments, Dennis Shornack says, quote, "Kill the stupid bill, RSO forever." So let's do that.
Well,
And he also said, just a BS bill with somebody's name on.
So this is the other thing. This is the other thing. And sorry, Representative, but I'm going to say it. A lot of these legislators just find bills that don't mean anything to introduce, and it's like a game. How many bills can I get passed this year? And
it's just, political
she's coming on to agree.
Yeah.
And they introduce bills to appease constituents that they know are never going to pass.
Yeah.
They know that the bill's never going to get any traction, but you know what? That whatever they got, I'm not going to name it, but whatever they got in exchange for their support, they threw something out there that they knew was never going to get anywhere, but it fell in their wheelhouse or some nonsense they spewed in the past. So it makes sense.
No, Mr. Hash Bash. No. I have to step on top of you for that. Because there is some, most of what you say is absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. I always say that, when I see people doing these resolutions, that's fluff stuff. Some of it's important, but most of it, and even most of the legislation is not all that. But then you have some good legislation, like for instance, you know what? Whoever put me looking at myself, I don't like that. Put it back on so I can see everybody. I do not like that. I hate that.
You can blame.
Thank Thank
actually
you.
did it, but Rick
Thank you. Thank you.
accepts the blame.
So, and I appreciate you making us all feel all important, like, and just highlighting, showlighting just the individual person who's speaking. So thank you.
Too many bells and whistles, maybe.
I like to be at the table. And when we're all like this, I just feel like we're all at the table and I'm not talking at you and I'm not on a stage by myself, because it is not about any one of us. Anyway, let me get back to, I had to step on you, Mr. Hash Bash, because there are sometimes that, for instance, I have not so many, but I have some good legislation that for whatever reasons, some of it's political, some of it they are some of the legislators are listening to their constituents, who some of them just has Cynthia A. Johnson on the most hated list. So they can't even, their brains, but anyway, I have a bill such as you all know, the eliminating the use and the sales tax. Don't even think that we'll see the daylight unless if you all help, we might be able to do it. Another bill I have, illegal dumping. Good bills. I can't shut my mouth up, even though some of the legislation and some of the things that I want to fight for so hard, I still have to get it out there. I may even in my good mind, I may say, you know what, this is not going to pay, but I got to get it out there. On the other hand, there is some times where I've said to my colleagues, listen, this is not going to move with my name on it. Take it. That is how we all should be operating as legislators. But unfortunately, that's not the way all people think. Just think of the legislators like your family. And we're all at park. And all of us, we have so many different personalities. But one day, we are going to start coming together on good things. This is good, but this is not as important as other things, you understand? And I'm not trying to take anything away from what it is that we're trying to accomplish. But there's just so many needs, so many asks. And then people come to me and like, I've gotten myself involved in this because I know that there's some terrible things that people who look like me, opportunities that people who look like me, our color is used, our communities are used, and we are used in some kind of form or fashion. And I am just one of those, hoping that the people who I'm looking at right now, although we may have differences, that we can live a life in peace and harmony, and all of us can prosper. Because this is really what all of us are right now talking about. How can we prosper? And then on another, and I'm just going to have to be straight with you all. We have to do something about not encouraging our youth. I don't want us to be seen as promoting alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana to our youth. And that's where I am. And maybe I should have said that ahead of time. I think that's where you all are too. I think I'm with a bunch of people who really care about their families, their communities, their families, their children. So So that, Mr. Hash Bash, sometimes I put bills out that I know is not going to see the light of day.
Oh, I wasn't talking about those type of bills and for
Oh,
people
well.
like you. No.
Aw.
That's no. That's see now there's a big difference in a bill like that you know is never going to go anywhere, but is the right thing to do, as compared to the legislators who will compromise and give up their vote and do what they got to do because somebody's supporting them in such a way.
Absolutely.
And they, in exchange for that support, put out a bill that they know is not going to go anywhere, but it facilitates the agreement they made with whoever, whatever. And it may just be for someone else's vote. It may be for a trip. I don't know. I'm not saying. I'm just telling you that there's some quid pro quo going on for a lot of legislation. And that's what I think a lot of people, even activists, don't understand how the system works, which is why it's great that someone like Robin and someone like yourself, Representative, come out and explain to the people that, I mean, we all saw the Schoolhouse Rock thing, but they stopped playing that. These kids have no idea. I mean, the reality is that these kids think if you want to make change, you go march down the street and bust windows and tear things up, and then the media will pay attention to you. But I'm not looking for the media. I'm looking for the activists who are willing to get involved, because that's what makes change. And that's why introducing a bill that you know isn't going to go anywhere when it comes to dumping, I mean, come on. The reason these people don't want that bill to go anywhere is it would eliminate what they do.
Well, a lot of these good ideas now,
if they can't drop it in your neighborhood and in the city.
a lot of these good ideas are now introduced. And like we said earlier, maybe next session, when there's a better composition of lawmakers there, this conversation could be continued with a more productive crowd potentially.
And that's why I'm interested in what's about to happen. Are we going to see some things introduced and try to be pushed through in this next piece of the pie, or are things going to wait until after we get to the redistricting and things are very different? I'm afraid that they're going to try to ram some things through right now.
Yeah,
we're all afraid of.
My lobbyist and I just had this conversation a couple of hours trying to figure out, and I'm sure that, somebody will find somebody stupid enough to introduce a bill. Later we'll find out that, maybe $500,000 was shuffled through a C4. That always comes out later, but you never find out until, the legislator goes and takes their new job.
I get this image of Meekoff when you say that for some reason.
Yeah, but because
so I guess
who do we know? Who do we know that who? I'm getting tie-tongued. Who do we know that falls into that category?
Oh, I'll send you a Detroit Free Press article, and you can.
Oh, thank you, because
Detroit News. It was Detroit News. No, it's well documented. I'll send it to you. But I guess my point is yeah, some idiot will, out of the blue, introduce a bill, take it, doing something stupid like, taking away the plant count or whatever, and they have to get a super majority. And that legislator is going to do it anyway, just to, for whatever he's going to get out of it. And then, we will, call the Campaign Finance Network and launch an investigation. And, this is not our first rodeo. So, pay a PR company to make sure that gets out in the news so that everybody finds out about it, and that's the kind of stuff that we have to do. To be watchdogs. We have to be watchdogs. I mean, we worked hard for these laws. So anyhow, with that being said, something will probably get introduced. Somebody will do it. And it'll probably be when they come back from break, from summer break or something, if I had to guess. They'd be stupid to do it now, but we'll see.
Would it be, so we didn't mention this one yet, but this would be an example of a supportable change to the act. There is a bill introduced by Representative Garza that would allow for pediatric cannabis patients to use their medicine on school grounds. That removes the restriction, that makes things more functional, efficient, creates a better situation. And of course, we support that. That opens up the same area of law that could screw with caregivers, as is being proposed by the MCMA. Is it possible to do something like getting right back into session and saying, let's just put this thing through right now? For one thing, it'll be there for the school year, because that's what its point is to be for grade schools. And then the other reason would be so that it just goes by itself with no adulteration or no negotiation, and everybody agrees that this is something that's very important and should be done in a timely manner.
I wish things would happen just the way you described it. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. And I mean, it sounds nice. Sounds like we bowl that up, and but that's not the way it works.
Keep in mind that it took us 6 years to re-legalize marijuana infused products after the Carruthers decision.
I get it.
Yes.
Yep. And of course, amendments are always thrown onto bills when they come through. And even if something doesn't seem like it's got a lot of traction, when lame duck comes around, all the craziest proposals still have a new opportunity to become law, because at that point, oftentimes lawmakers are less caring about their reputations. So.
But Jamie, I'll tell you what, though, if you and all of your supporters, Dennis, don't disagree with me. Just hold on for a second. I think I know what you're talking about. With your supporters, if you reach out to these legislators, all of them, and get supporters to talk about that House bill. What's the House bill number? The one that Garza introduced and the one that I co-sponsored?
Jaden's Law.
I can't think of the number. I apologize. I'll look it up here.
Yeah, but I think that if we made the case that this is really for children who need the medicine, I think that we might be able to push that through. I think that some people will listen.
That's House Bill 4797 and House Bill 4796. One amends the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. One amends the Education Code.
Jamie got to it faster than me. There's a lot of bills here.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are.
Yeah.
I want to clarify something when I had said earlier that I want us not to encourage children, people under the age of 18, if we would not encourage them. I stand on that. When I say that, I'm talking about smoking, recreational smoking. We have to, there's a lot of things that we do as adults. And it is my view. And I'm not talking about medicine. I'm not talking about the CBD. I'm talking about getting high. That's what I'm talking about.
And not encouraging kids to do that.
And not encouraging kids to do it. That's okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
I agree. I agree with you, Johnson, and I think it's really important. I've got 4 teenagers. I drug tested them all. I was really tough on them. You want key cars to a key? Prove to me that you don't have any cannabis in your system. Why? Because I know as a parent that it's my responsibility before I put them behind a vehicle to make sure there's nothing in their system. Because if they accidentally get in a car accident, even if it's not their fault, and they get tested, they could lose their license, go to jail, and then what? So I love them that much that I'm gonna make sure, knowing what I know that the system could do to them. I am probably a little bit extreme in those things, but I don't want them to fall victims to the system. So you have to be real proactive with teenagers. Same thing with, lock boxes. I use lock boxes. Of course
I gotta go, guys. You all take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative. Really
You're very welcome. Bye.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
Very rarely do you get to have a frank discussion with elected officials and lawmakers in the way that we have today. We talked to Rep. Irwin, and he's very open, but we're used to that. Representative Johnson and Richard Clement, thanks very much for your role in the representative's office and for getting her up to speed on the things that are important to our community. But that particular individual is an asset to us, and we all owe her our support.
Definitely.
All right, I'm gonna bow out too, guys. I'm gonna go feed those kids.
Robin, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Bye, Adam.
Bye, sweetheart.
Saw you on
Love
the show last night. Love you too. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank God we get a chance to talk to Paul, though. It seems like your connection is better now, Paul. You were in the middle of talking about specific bills and the particular language and the differences between some semantic changes and substantive changes. And in some of the bills you're looking at, the substantive changes are just not there, right?
Well, and that's the issue. So again, like I go back to even with 5129, the only real substantive change has to do with the food service establishments. And the question always goes back to, well, why, right? What is it about food service establishments? Does this prevent somebody from using a cigar bar or something that allows smoking to piggyback on it as long as there's food served inside of it? Like I think of Churchill's is a business that's around this part of the woods that is a cigar bar that is, fits the tobacco consumption exception, and can you consume on those premises? Or is this a bill where the larger food service industry comes back and says, hey, throw this language in there just for our protection, just in case? Because when I see language like this, I always go back to, there's one provision in the MRTMA that says, if you're going to do anything that kind of sounds like anything that you need a license for, you need a license for it, right? So that it solves the loophole of caregiver centers, if you will. It solves the loophole of social clubs, and it solves a lot of the clever old school exceptions that we're all very familiar with. So I think that provision is always going to control, because that's what the state police will act under. So it goes back to, why is a food service establishment, why is that appropriate? And is that because this is the way to eliminate a consumption lounge from also having food, right? So they want to keep a consumption lounge only, again, like a booze only bar rather than a restaurant as well. So some of that, looking into the substantive changes, go into the question of why, and does this substantive change really affect anybody immediately, or is the effect more, down the road in the distance in terms of the landscape of legal cannabis in 10 years? And is this one of those, and I didn't really think of this until now, is this the way around the tobacco law? Because the no smoking inside
is about tobacco.
It's about tobacco.
Right.
It's specifically about tobacco. So if this is one of those, and unless this is, yes, and this is the other issue, is that I don't know if, based on the type of legislative creature that the MRTMA is and the MMA is that if they could, and we get this lesson from the improper transport law, is if they could amend the no smoking indoors to include cannabis without having it done through the MMA, MRTMA, and MFLA.
Amending by reference, in other words.
Correct. So it has to be a direct change affecting the definition of, which goes back to some of the other companion bills here, is it affects the definition of cannabis. So if you are within, you have to sort of be within the backyard of cannabis to address laws changing cannabis. So is this the end around of the tobacco law? And if so, the question that goes back to who's affected by it, how are they affected by it, what limitation does this have on anyone's existing rights, future rights, or ability to capitalize on the cannabis industry?
But I just, Paul, to touch on that, I agree with you very much that this is how they include marijuana into places where you cannot smoke tobacco. I always point out that you can smoke weed in any elevator because the sign is very specific no smoking of tobacco products. So I generally light up in the elevator and off we go. But as for the restaurant aspect of things, I believe, like you pointed out, that what they're really doing is upgrading the tobacco law in a very sloppy way, because they're just throwing in food service establishment. What they really mean is that the reason you can't smoke in a food service establishment is that we can't have workers subject to smoke. So that's the reason. So now you can pass this law. I can open a consumption lounge with a restaurant as long as none of my employees enter the consumption lounge itself. So I can have a window that opens up and your food gets passed through to you and it gets closed, both rooms on separate ventilation systems. That would be legal under what they're talking about here.
Well, and Adam, you're right. If my position to expand on that is the clever guy answer to that is, well, let's look up what food service establishment means as that term is defined under Section 1107 of the food law, right? So it's one of those deals where I can have a food truck, but because that's not technically a food service establishment, and this is where I start to get into, like, without looking at this, I'd be willing to bet that a food service establishment entails things like licensing and inspections through the health department and typical, let's call it a restaurant in our common understanding. And again, if the intent of that is to protect the employees under the same logic that the tobacco law was passed, we asked the question of, does it affect someone's rights? Does it affect something else? Or is this one of those like general peace rules, right? Here's a general rule, and here's, like Adam is saying, here's the exception. Just like, you can smoke at a bar on a patio as long as there are no employees on the patio. These are
we already
loopholes.
have exemptions to this law in the casino laws. Casinos all across America are allowed to have cigarette smoking. Some in certain areas, that might be a decision of the casino itself, but under the law, they're exempt from the non-smoking laws. And most of the time, it's because the casinos have been able to prove that they have air handling systems that remove the air immediately. And those are the things that technology is going to come into play, and that's going to make all the difference in what we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's an effect of strong lobbying too. It's the same way as that if you like casinos, our business is really dependent upon people who smoke and people sitting in one place for a long time. So let's do it. The other one is some practical stuff about, the cigar bar exception, where it's a certain percentage of your receipts come from the sale of tobacco products. So what a lot of these places do is they have a second floor with a separate cash register that only rings tobacco, so that thereby their percentage of tobacco in that register area is, exceeds 90% or whatever it is, and thereby it meets the definition of a cigar lounge. So some of these, again, we're finding the loopholes, we're finding the soft corners, because the overall intent of the law, let's just say the general intent of the law, I don't know if anybody would really disagree with what it would be, is to say, okay, you're not forcing an employee to be subject to something that, they either take the job or work the job and get paid or quit, right? So it provides employers some protection, and it provides, again, the same idea of like, I can't imagine having a steak in some place where there's somebody smoking a cigarette next to me, right? The idea seems so antiquated, almost like smoking a cigarette on an airplane, right? Some of these things are just a way of moving the rest of it into the future. But that, in reality, again, Rick, to your question, it's the only real substantive changes in terms of the proposed bills. When you have
Paul, would you re-emphasize whether or not the language change to, was it resin? Is substantive and creates, concern or a big change in law? It's still confusing for at least one person.
You know what?
Well,
it is.
person is questionable.
Well, and the wording, like I said, I think the wording is at best problematic without a clarifying definition, right? Because again, you could call it separating marijuana, rubber gloves, as long as there's a definition as to
whatever the usage is.
Right. Whatever that
You have to know
word
what the
that you're
usage is.
using. Right, correct. Just like we, again, going back to what we fought so hard in the MMA was, here's this word, again, medical use. Medical use is then defined in Section 3 as this, which is internal possession and so on and so forth. So that's where it goes back to, is that I don't think that the language change itself, the intent of what they're trying to do, it seems that they're trying to clarify that point, but they're doing so without simple language, right? Like, let's find language that we can all agree upon, and let's find some general definition that is going to be accepted, or better yet, clearly defined within the content of the law itself, so that we know what marijuana concentrate is, and we know even better what the act of separating marijuana concentrate is, right? So if you had an inclusive list, is to say you can't separate marijuana concentrate by doing this. Separating marijuana concentrate includes but is not limited to this, and this, and any other type of shit that might get your eyebrows blown off. That is a start, because at least now we have the intent of what that section seeks to prevent, which kind of seems to happen as you further read down the page, but we then avoid the problem that we're facing right now, which Robin brought up, which is, okay, now we can separate plant resin, and other people saying, okay, if I can't separate marijuana concentrate, does that mean that I can't turn isolate into distillate, right? Does that mean I can't turn any of these products into further products down the line? And if I'm asking these questions, that means that's a lawsuit, right? Because if there's no clarity, then you're going to enforce this. And what's the enforcement going to look like? Because again, unless you roll up on me and I got butane or another method that utilizes a flashpoint below 100 degrees, then I'm fighting this, because what the hell is marijuana concentrate? And that, I think, where you get into, while it's not intended to be a substantive change, the effect could be.
Well, because laws are about definition. That's all.
Right. And laws are about understanding, because if this is one of those deals where the law changes and you change the language without a definition and there is no interpretation, now we get into, okay, well,
that's where real people go to jail, Paul, right? That's where real people go to jail.
You know where we are, Rick? We're back to 2010, 2011.
That's what I was thinking myself. When we talk about ambiguity in the law, that means the people read it one way and the courts read it another. And that unfortunately means people get jammed up in the legal system in between. And we just had a series of 4 or 5 bills that sought to unify the definition of marijuana that is existent over the Hemp Act, the Testing Act, the MMMA, the MMFLA, the MRTMA, all of them using the same definition to avoid problems like this. And then we have a proposed bill that apparently got through Legislative Services Bureau that contains language that's once again problematic. That's what I thought we had evolved.
Is it likely that the LSB would choose that because they already have a plan of when they have an opportunity to get into the language in these sections to homogenize all these things to be across the board?
It's the reader's understanding. It's the reader's understanding, right? If you are not within the cannabis community and you're just regular guy in a tie in Lansing, right? Marijuana concentrate, it doesn't create the impression that the cannabis community understands the term marijuana concentrate to mean. And that's the grand confusion. And what's funny is Robin brought up, how long it took to change Carruthers around. I've got experience at the Carruthers matter, and in reality, we're going back to the same type of problem that existed for Carruthers, which is the limited, narrow use of language that didn't have a definition, that creates it creates interpretation at the judicial level that, again, like you're saying, Rick, goes back to, this is where people get tickets, do jail time, lose property, have all kinds of other penalties, because their activity is going to be written up as a violation of the marijuana laws, and outside of those protections, and now all bets are off, and now we have problems. So
some people become accidental criminals just because of a misunderstanding in language, not because of any felonious intent. There's no mens rea, but they still get charged with felonies. They still get jammed up. Even with the more forgiving program we have with the MRTMA, still there are ways people can accidentally have problems. Paul, isn't that true?
Absolutely, and that has always been. And I tell you what, at the experiential level of attorneys, is that most of the people who have found their way through the court system under the MMA were the ones that were the most honest about it, right? It was the story of, hey, knock, 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 I hear you have plans. And the guy's like, sure do, come on in. And the cop's like, well, you're out of compliance. And the guy's like, I am? I thought this is how it worked. And then he gets arrested, he gets his stuff trashed, and then you have to figure that out in court, because now you're fighting over what he did, what the cop's understanding of it was, what the real legal interpretation of the facts are. And, that's a situation where, again, I've been saying this for years, is you may win in the end, but you have lost the whole way getting there, right? That victory a year or two down the road doesn't, you get the victory, you don't even get the apology letter, you don't get your fees returned, you don't get any of that time back or anything like that. You might get a court case with your name on it that helps other people, but that only has value to certain people, I guess.
Right.
But
so that's one of the reasons why we need to deschedule.
Yeah, we do need to deschedule.
Precisely.
Yeah,
and it also goes
we need
back
to. We're almost at the end of the program too.
Yeah, and we're going to go over, undoubtedly at this point by at least a couple of minutes. I hope everybody just wants to hang on for a minute, because when everybody gets a shot at it.
But keep going on, man. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, and I want to get back to a little bit. I guess we end up saying, look, you have to have usage for the words to know how they apply, and as if this thing were to get any traction and were to even get to the point where it might pass, that would have to be something that we insist on. However, as Robin said, and as we are all saying, if it does get traction, and it has not, so it's not like a real issue at the moment, we will stand up to it and oppose it, and this stuff will not make a difference anyway. But Paul, I want to get back to the other part about it, how it could pertain to lounges and that kind of stuff, and clarify with you about the rules. And I think there might be a connection here too, but the rules say something to the effect, you can't be in a space, like even a private club in a commercial building, that charge you a membership fee or a fee to get in, or sells anything there, and then use cannabis there. Independently, you can do all of those things.
Correct. And I tell you what, that's an issue. I've got clients that are going through that, and I think that's an issue of interpretation. And I think it might be something as simple as whether or not they're offering it for sale, and whether or not they can prove that, because they're going to go with this idea of, oh, are you dispensary? No. Okay. Oh, are you consumption lounge? Well, no. Okay. Well, what are you? And then they'll go in there and they'll take pictures and say, okay, well, based on this proof, this is what we're alleging you are, and I don't care what you say, right? Even if you say you're a private club or a social club, whatever it is. So it really comes down to, I think, a matter of who's, how did the cops show up, right? How did you get the attention of it? How did you draw the attention of it? Is it your competitor? Is it because the whole neighborhood knows what you do? Or is it because you paint a sign on the front door and it tells everybody what you do, right? So there's a lot of reasons, just like any other code violation or any other reason to get an inspector at your door. There's a lot of things you can do to avoid that. And most of it's through, good neighbor policies and good PR. So I think that to circle back to say, yes, are those three things independently, legally allowed and permissible on private property? Yes. And I think that becomes one of those situations where, sue them and find out, right? Push back and say, this doesn't apply to me, or this is vague and generalized.
It's going to require a challenge. That was my next thing. And it's
precisely.
I want to cut in just for a second and just offer Jim, I know he does have to go by 6 today, and just say, Jim, if you want to get a couple words in here before you do have to duck out, now's the time.
Hey, great show. I don't have much to say. The NTO Fest is September 19th, and there's a Michigan Psychedelic Society meeting July 13th, Colin, I think, at 3 p.m. I don't know the location yet. We haven't figured that out yet.
I think it's the 17th.
17th? Okay.
Yeah, it's Saturday.
Okay.
Third Saturday in July.
Okay.
I don't know where the location is either.
Very good.
But all right, we appreciate it, man, and we will start winding down here. But I knew we were not gonna hit 6 o'clock. We were in this conversation. Go ahead, Rick.
I'm out too. I just wanted to say thank you very much to Robin Sider and Representative Cynthia Johnson, for Richard Clement, and for Shelly for all showing up for the show today. Wonderful, wonderful time. I think this is going to be one of our most viewed programs because we're talking about cutting edge stuff and cutting through the bullshit. And there's nothing better for patients than to give them clarity and peace of mind, or to properly warn them about things they should be afraid of. Thank you very much.
Right on.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay. So Paul, if you don't mind, like kind of finish up what you were saying, and then leave us with anything that you'd like to make sure you get in before we finally do wrap this up.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of it is in terms of
I don't know what happened.
Oh, it's got to freeze because of the connection a little bit.
He'll be back.
Colin, in the meantime, do you want to wrap up anything about?
Hey, all right.
Okay. There he is. Okay.
In terms of the appropriate place to put pressure on the politicians, in terms of streamlining the definition so that the people can understand the laws, because that's really what it comes down to, is the laws have to be written in a way that people can understand what's allowed and what's not. Right. So with that, it comes down to making sure that you talk to your legislators to say, define this language. I understand what you're after. I understand what you want to do, but clarify it so that we don't find ourselves in the weeds later on about this issue. Right. And the other one has to do with, if you can tighten up the and maybe the PR is up to us, right? Maybe the PR is up to the cannabis community to say, hey, these bills mean this. Here's proof. Click on this link and it'll show you that this is the change, right? In terms of, here are points of discussion, right? Points of discussion are, what does a food service establishment mean? What does separating marijuana concentrate mean? Here's how we're going to address this issue. Again, come back to our show and we'll discuss it. And then really give out the information and address it to say, hey, all.
No. Here he's going back.
Is clarifying what is happening. All we're doing is clarifying the language to make the law easier to use and easier to apply, and more
less room for bad
so
decision makers to be interpreting it.
Correct. And also reconciling the differences of the time that has occurred between the MMA, the MMFLA, and the MRTMA, that when you have definitions or changes or intents of law that now are completely different, that they've all been, let's just say, consolidated, or that we're now on the other side of the hill of legalization, right? Consolidate the definitions, great. Make it all universal. Make everything appropriate so that we know what marijuana is and isn't, regardless of who you're, under which law you're applying. Because now it's the lens of, can we capitalize or be burned by the inconsistencies? And I think the better question is, can we avoid all that problem to begin with? Because we don't want the inconsistencies. We want the legal gray areas. We want to avoid all that crap. And I think that as long as the consistencies are at least clear and are at least to our benefit, or at least not to our detriment, then there's really not a problem, right? Pick the battles, right? Pick the issues so that, we just don't show up saying, we oppose any and all, anything at all whatsoever, because it doesn't need it. When in reality, they're not changing the law, they're changing their ability to process the law or to administer the law, right? So they're not changing anything about the dinner that you're getting. They might change something, the way it's called or where they get it from in the kitchen, right? So the result, the day-to-day result, the effect, the immediate effect on the caregiver and the patient is zero. But the legislative, the size of government surrounding the issues has now shrank, right? We've consolidated the issues, we've addressed it now
We're getting most of it out. I know that.
Talking about what the definition of marijuana is, then let's all get on the same page. Let's unify it, because a lot of these bills just have to do with, call marijuana what you call it under the MRTMA, right? Now, if that's a problem, because now they're including things that should not be marijuana in the definitions under the MRTMA, again, pick your battles. Pick the part where you have, give your legislator the ability to sniper fire the issue, not just shotgun blast it, right? And that, because that's where the protections come in. Because in reality, the language changes are, again, it's ease of reading. They're just, making it, let's just say a 45-year-old person wrote the law, and now they're having like a 25-year-old English major college grad come through and just be like, yeah, this is some clunky, chunky language. Let's make this clear, right? Again, the hope is that's to our benefit.
Well,
if it's not, then
I would hope
we got to head them off at the pass and get it changed before any language becomes problematic.
Right on. So, Paul, I mean, earlier today, too, we also had a conversation about an expungement group that I'm with, that Josie Scott from Sons and Daughters and that Ryan Basor from Redemption. Actually started off as a project between those two organizations, Redemption and Sons and Daughters, turned into a new organization, Great Lakes Expungement Network. And we talked to you today about working with us, and you're very interested in that, and you have some great ideas and that type of stuff, and I just want to let you know it's much appreciated, and definitely hope to continue that conversation also. And as we kind of going to wind up here, is there anything else that you want to leave us with before we wrap up? I was talking to you, Paul. I don't know if you were catching that. It's maybe not. Okay, there you go.
I can't hear you, Jimmy. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I was
playing this game. Okay.
Okay. Just thanking you for your
I can see you. I can see your lips moving.
Paul's going to be participating with us in Glenn, and we appreciate him for that and everything that you had to contribute today in this conversation, and kind of confirming a lot of what we said last night and today about what generally is going on with these bills. Appreciate that coming from a lawyer now, so people can feel as though there's more credibility in legal analysis with that type of experience and expertise. Colin, do you want to?
I don't really have anything. I think I just sat back and watched the show. I just listened to everything that was going on. It was a good show.
Right on. Dennis says, "Holy shit!" before we wrap this all up. And Mr. Hashbash, why don't you actually give us final words before we
no problem. I was to back up what Paul was saying. There's like one word that defines that whole concept, and that would be the word overages, because we all know what overages means. It's never been written into any law. It became part of our world because somebody decided to make it part of the emergency rules. Now people would actually like to write it into the law because definitions are important, which takes me to another thing. I would ask Jamie, has anyone asked Brisboe his opinion on the child school bill?
Oh, I don't know. That would have been good
because I would think
to pass by Robin while she was on to get back to that.
I meant to, but I had to let her speak. So the point was, I would like to find out what Brisboe would have to say, and if he would enact it as emergency rules until the legislature can get their act together on it. Because who could say no to that?
Right. I think it would be cool to do it beginning of I know that it was idealistic, but it would serve the purpose of the school year, not being fucked with by other laws, that kind of stuff.
But I think that's the campaign right there, that we introduce it so that, we put it out there that, hey, we want this for the school year. We need emergency rules because these people can't do it. And it's going to make a difference. And we should be able to know exactly how many pediatric patients there are in the state. And I would go as far as claiming every one of them needs their marijuana while in school.
So we'll have Amy Carter on here, who's been part of the group,
cool,
along with My Compassion and others that worked with Rep Garza to get this going. And now they're kind of seeking out support to really help get this through and to protect it, at the same time. Right. So it's going to be difficult, but we're going to try to do it with the kind of experience and organization and kind of positioning that like Robin and her organization has right now, through those different things. I think we could probably give it a good chance, because as you said, everybody should support that, and nobody seems
right there. I mean, that you can't even if it's written poorly, you can't be against it. And many of us are against some of these bills that we read because they're just written so poorly. You know, if the intent was, if they were able to write the intent that they had, well, maybe we could support some of them. But, you know, I think right now the thing to do is stay vigilant and pay attention to what's coming down the pike, because now they're starting to float their trial balloons and see what they can get some traction on. And they'll take it through the summer. I think, as mentioned earlier, it's important to show up at their coffees and their meet and greets, and you know, be respectful and ask some questions and let them know that you're one of their constituents. Because the reality is, I would want to know, if I was an elected official, how many people in my district had voted for Prop 1, how many people had voted on this issue or that issue. Because some of these places, if you're not on the side, if you're not on our side, you're against 65, 68% of your constituents.
Right on.
Makes a difference. Makes a difference. So we got a lot to do, but that's what the grassroots people do.
Yeah, thanks for reminding people to do that, and we're going to talk about that more, obviously, and try to get some organization with that, with the various organizations that are out there. Normal, of course, would be primed with your help to get some of that going. I think to end this, it's been a great show. It went over. So Rick and I were just talking about shortening the show length, and then we end up going over. I just like to give, as we leave here, Jazz Cabbage Cafe, I'm going to throw on the sponsors once again. Really appreciate the ability to do this. They give us the means to do this consistently, and that's much appreciated. And I appreciate everybody's participation today. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Paul. Everybody else ducked out, but I appreciate all of them also. Representative Johnson, Robin, and everybody who was on the show with us today, Rick and Colin and Jim and Shelly and Richard Clement. So I didn't want to get into the names, but I think that's it. Thanks, everybody. Nonetheless, Jazz Cabbage Cafe, another really great show. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.